I think we need to first establish things that are black and white, right and wrong, and
Okay.
things that are personal preferences. It's a fine line of seeing who God made my child to be, and my job as a parent is to help them become the person God created them to be.
This is Rooted by the River, an SRC parenting podcast. None of us have parenting figured out, but I'm so glad you're coming on this journey. A journey to grow as parents while we raise and disciple our children. Rooted by the River is here to equip your family to root deep in the living waters of Jesus and his love. I'm John Houmes, the family pastor at Spanish River Church. Welcome back to Rooted by the River. I am here today with Torrey Roberts to talk about individuality in our kids and yet also being part of the family. Torrey, welcome to Rooted by the River.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, currently you serve as the engagement director at Oceanview Baptist Church in South Carolina, but
That's
you have
correct.
a long connection with South Florida through Sheridan House Ministries.
Yes, I do.
In 2001, you served as a behavioral specialist in the girls' home at Sheridan House. And then from 2010 to 2025, 15 years, you did Parenting on Purpose, which included a podcast with your dad, Bob Barnes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to draw on some of that experience. And I want to ask you some questions just on your take on some of these things. Parents want to draw out the best in their kids. They want to let them be them. Every child is created in the image of God and has his fingerprints on them, and he has designed them in a certain way. But there's also another side of that we want them to take on the values and culture of our family. We want to raise them a certain way. You know, for instance, we are Houmeses. Your children are Roberts, and that means something.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's just even start by asking the question, how do you balance bringing out your child's personality and their individuality, but also not letting that individuality run the family?
That's a really good question. And one of the things I feel like I learned just in my time at Sheridan House was there's balance is, I think, the key word that you said right there. Parenting is a balance. It's almost like a seesaw. You know, like you do have individuality on one side, and you have just the family dynamic and parenting. You know, and it's just you're trying to want to sit right in that middle spot. Raising a child, you know, that verse, it's in Proverbs, and I don't have my Bible in front of me, but it's the raise up a child in the way they should go.
Yeah.
And when he's old, he will not depart from it. And when I look at that scripture, I think if you take it back to the original context, it's the way they are bent. We're raising our children in the way they are bent. And like you're saying, it's a fine line of seeing who God made my child to be. And my job as a parent is to help them become the person God created them to be.
Yeah.
But then also, we're going to just, I guess, rephrasing what you're asking me, but also then find that balance of that personality needs to fit within our family dynamic.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you have more than one child, you automatically know that your kids are different because their personalities are different. How they respond to discipline is different. How they respond to rewards are different. You know, even their likes and dislikes are different. And so I do feel like it is such a fascinating, almost experiment that we have as parents, trying to fit them and make us all work together. Because I feel like even as parents, I know that our personalities are different. You know, I am very different from how my husband approaches things, even though we were both behavioral specialists at Sheridan House. We both have the same training, but our personalities come to play. So that's just I feel like a big mismatch of all the things that make up a family dynamic.
Right.
So, go ahead.
No, that's a helpful framework just to even say, let's state the obvious here. Because sometimes I think that gets, we forget that, right? We forget that everyone sees the world differently. And, you know, even as a dad of daughters, like I'll do one thing with one of my daughters and it has this effect. They respond this certain way, and then do the exact same thing with another daughter and they don't respond that way at all. It's something totally different.
Yeah, well, I mean, like my two boys, I have two teenage boys, so we're we're reversed. But my one of my boys is a little more sports driven,
Hmm.
and a little more analytical mind, and then one of my boys is into drama and the arts, and they're both all boy, they're both rough and tumble, they're both wrestling all the time, but who God made them to be is so different. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, so it's my job well, mine and my husband's job to steward who they are, really. Like it's an interesting responsibility to have.
I like that word steward. Um, what are some signs that parents might be struggling to balance their individuality with the family culture? Or what are some hangups parents might have that they don't even realize that's the struggle that's happening?
We'll take my youngest, Judah. So he's my drama arts child, and I loved musical theater. I was
Hmm.
in musical theater in high school. I sing. It is one of the passions of mine, and so it would be very easy for me to push my personal hopes and desires onto that child, because I see things and talents in him that he may be able to go farther than I was ever able to go farther,
Yeah.
than I was ever able to go. And so I could have a tendency, if I'm not aware, I could have a tendency to push my dreams and my hopes as an adult, that my unrealized expectations, onto my child. And I think we probably, each one of us has a child that's similar to us, and it would be easy to push our personal agenda onto them versus what
Yeah.
God has for them. But
That's a
also,
that's
go
a
ahead.
really good tension point. I actually didn't think about that as I was kind of prepping to to ask you questions. That's a really interesting tension. The I was thinking more about like here's what our family's about, but you're actually bringing this out of like, hey, I see this in you and I want it to look this way, rather than going, I see
Yeah.
this in you and I'm not sure how it's going to play out in your development. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah, so I may push harder than I
Yeah.
need to, or another tension point I feel like we see as parents, is because you may be like me, I may want to correct something. um,
Hmm.
so I may be harder on a certain child's behavior because it's either, I hate to use the word trigger because it's such a buzzword right now, but it's maybe triggering something within me because I see myself.
Right.
And so we tend to be harder on that particular personality because you want to correct it. So those are certain tension points I feel like within parenting that
Hmm.
we can be aware of as we parent our
Hmm.
children.
I think a lot of parenting can be rooted in fear. Like we
Huh,
can have this
yes.
motivation of fear that we don't even realize. I mean, some of that just comes from the fact that we have much more decades of experience than our kids, and so we can see the implications of the choices that they're making. But I find that when it comes to this particular topic, there can be a lot of fear of limiting our children. Like, oh, I don't want to be the
Hmm.
parent that says no. But then at the same time, like, I don't want to be the parent that loses authority and lets their individuality rule. What are some
Yeah.
helpful ways for parents to like address their fear or confront their fear, specifically when it comes to individuality and family membership?
I think that you can definitely use your spouse or a friend, just and having that self awareness, because a lot of our our fears, I think, are rooted just in even like how we were raised, maybe,
Hmm.
and just facing. Just I mean, personally, I'm almost like a perfectionistic bent,
Hmm.
so I almost have a perfectionistic view of parenting. So I am personally afraid to let my kids fail.
Hmm.
And that is something that my husband and I do talk about, because he'll be like, it's okay. It's okay that they're going to learn from the failure. You can't soften. And again, we're raising boys, so he's like they're going to have to fall down a little bit in order for them to learn and go forward. And so my husband and I do partner in that, and I would that's definitely a source of maybe wisdom and insight, using your spouse or a close friend, where you can just sit and have honest conversations.
That's good. Well, it takes some self awareness. So just to make sure I understand, you're saying for you, you have this bent towards, we all have a bent, right? So I appreciate you being
Yes.
honest about yours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we all have this bent, and what you're saying is when your child fails, or if you see a possible failure, that triggers something in you that might make you either afraid for them or even afraid how that reflects on you.
Yes, yes. That and so that would make me tend to be a little more overbearing in that circumstance, or want to correct it for them versus giving them the choice to fail. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
everything we do in parenting is teaching and training, but they have to exercise that training.
Yeah.
And so I have a tendency to want to correct the training before they've been able to exercise it, because I don't want them to fail.
Yeah.
So, for example, I'm throwing him under the bus, but hey, it was done to me, so I'm going to do it to him. So one of my sons was struggling in an area of school and really struggling to just stay on top of things. And, I wanted to micromanage him. But I have teenagers. And we're working towards college, right? And so they need to be able to learn now. They've got to find how they stay on top of themselves and kind of self-motivate. Whereas if I'm behind them consistently trying to motivate my 17-year-old, that's not going to work for him next year.
Yeah.
So I that's how it comes to play for me. Like I tend to want to go into mom micromanagement mode, and I need to be self-aware. Like, nope, I've given him the choice. And if he chooses to make the wrong one, then we go from there. I can't necessarily protect him from these little micro choices obviously I'm not talking about letting your child go out and drink on Friday night. I'm talking about whether or not they do their homework.
Yeah, sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So,
because he's going to have to wrestle with that on his own. He's going to have to,
Correct.
if the consequences of any child's failure are withheld from them, they will be so surprised when they go in the real world and their boss,
Yes.
actually holds their hand to the fire. So
yes. So I think the point that I was making was, I think within that family dynamic, because we each have one, I think us as parents, knowing ourselves and having a healthy understanding of who we are, who our spouse is, makes us better parents and better able to, like we said, steward our children and steward that family dynamic.
yeah, you said something that made me think just a minute ago about the tendency for us to react to what we didn't like in our childhood. Just for instance, I had an acquaintance who his parents were very overbearing in the sense that like they didn't let him have any toys. He wasn't allowed to do activities, things like it was too much.
Wow.
And so how he responded when he had children is he bought them everything. The house was full of toys and clutter and things like that. And so what was interesting is you think about that psychologically, and he's just sort of, and we all have the tendency to do this, but he's just reacting to what he didn't like in his childhood, but he reacts in another unhealthy way rather than looking at who the child is and what they need and what he needs to steward that child. So we all have that tendency, and it can go the opposite way as well, right? It can be my parents let me do anything I wanted, so I'm not going to do that with my kids.
Right. Or this is what I know, so this is how I'm going to parent. I just think there's just so much, and again, I don't think we think about it, but there's so much necessary self-awareness for us to kind of dig through. We can't just, I love what you said, use the word react. And I think when you are reacting as a parent, you probably aren't going to get it right.
Yeah.
I think our goal as parents is to be, like we said, in that self-awareness, working with our spouse as a team and responding, which means kind of having a plan for things versus reacting.
Right. Let's even explore this idea of individuality and bringing out your child's personality, because I think how we think about that is important. So every Disney film is ingrained with the message, be true to yourself. It's like, the highest form of humanity is when you can bring yourself to expression. That's always part of the storyline. And as Christians, we're really called to be true to Christ, not true to ourselves.
Yeah.
Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. We are created in the image of God as individuals, but the calling isn't being true to yourself. We in some ways have absorbed the culture's radical individualism. What do
Yeah.
you think about that difference between rooting individuality and being created in the image of God versus the cultural radical individualism? Can parents absorb that without even realizing it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that it's again, we go back to that word balance, because it's not about being true to yourself, like you're saying. It is about being true to God, but it is also God created my child with a purpose, and so
Ooh.
he uniquely designed them. I mean, we go into Psalms and it talks about he knits them together. There's a purpose there, like you can't. I went off on a tangent when I was pregnant and I actually learned how to knit, which is a whole side story, but that using that language there, it is intentional, and there is a design there. And so
Yeah.
I think our children are uniquely crafted for a purpose.
Yeah.
And it is our job to utilize their time under our roofs to help them God's going to help them find their purpose, but I think we have to see their gifts and talents and not squelch them. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like there's times where you may want them to go, like, and this is where we were talking about before, you may want them to go on a certain path, but God uniquely crafted them to go on a certain path. And I think that really comes out with some of our more strong-willed children. I think that when you have a child that is strong-willed, there's this mentality of, I have to break their will. I have to break that. They need to come under authority.
Good luck.
And yeah, right. And I think our job is we don't ever want to break that will. God probably is created a leader here. They're very strong and he made them for a purpose. And so we want them to come under authority. We need to teach them and train them how to come under authority, because ultimately it's going to be God's authority. But we can't, our job is to try to be a student of our child, to see what are their unique qualities, and that takes time. We tell parents to be students of their children, so that we can know how best to discipline, how best to reward, how best to motivate. But we can only do that through time with them.
Yeah,
because we're all uniquely created.
Yeah, one of my friends was a math teacher at a private school, not here in South Florida, somewhere else, and he was a funny guy, because I would say, he would say, I don't see half a glass of water or half full or half empty. There's just a half a glass of water. So he called himself a realist, but
Yes.
very literal. But, he would he taught high school, and he would talk to the students and just tried to bring reality into their world as they talked about what do they want to do when they grew up. And his goal wasn't to squash them. It was to help them see what reality was. So I want to be the top scientist in the world or something like that. That's a great goal. Let's map that out. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the percentage out of human beings that, you have to be in this top percent, So he was just trying to help
achieve it.
that actually can achieve it. Or like, I want to get in the NBA. Okay. Here's the percentage of high school, And so
I hear that all the time. Yes.
Yeah. And his goal wasn't to like squash them. It was help them to see like how the world was reality. But he always said something funny to them, and maybe it sounds a little bit cynical, but his point was to help them have this balance of you're an individual and you're also a member of society, right? So he would say to them, hey, I want you to hear me. You're unique like everybody else. And I always thought that
great.
was
Yep.
Yeah, I always thought it was funny because like, hey, you are you. There's no one else like you. But that's also true of every other human being that's ever existed.
Yeah.
And I think there's something helpful there, because like I want my kid to find their purpose. I want them to know how God has made them and chase after that their whole life. And yet at the same time, I don't want my child to think that they or their purpose is the center of the universe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Even Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 12, he says, 1 Corinthians 12:27, he talks about members of the church, and he says, now you, plural, you all are the body of Christ and individually members of it. Like you're individuals and you're also part of this.
Right.
And so I think that's a helpful framework. And I think as parents absorb that tension, what does it look like, Torrey, for a parent to have a healthy view of that balance?
Gosh, it's hard. I I think that it's just in parenting consistently
Hmm.
would be, I guess, maybe what, because again, you are stewarding two different people, but there it should be a continuity in your house. And so maybe we find that balance in how we treat our children,
Hmm.
and making sure that we are consistent.
Yeah.
Because if we're treating one child differently than the other child, that
Hmm.
creates all sorts of problems. But also, that doesn't, like, I think we have house rules in our house,
Hmm.
and everybody falls under them. And so we have set rewards, set consequences. Like, if you're following that rule, you earn certain privileges. If you're not following that rule, you are you choose the consequence that comes along. So I think maybe it is our framework for parenting that creates that consistency, in
Yeah.
that this is what we do in our house.
Right. That's good. I was even just thinking of a real practical example. And I think from our own table, our own family table, like one of the things I ask my kids is, hey, we're going to pray right now. We're going to pray as a family. What do you want to pray for? And even that little tension of like, this is what we're doing as a family, but you get to bring your self-expression and how God's uniquely made you and what you've seen in the world today and who your friends are. We can pray for anything you want to, and yet we are going to pray.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah. I think that's great. That's a really good, very, very good practical example. I think that's good. But I also think I think family rhythms, and how, again, things that we do are something that we all do together. Like, I love that, sitting at the table together. That is a family rhythm,
mm,
that you are coming together as a unit, even bringing in like your experiences from the day, your experiences, my experiences, and we are sitting as a unit. So I think having family rhythms that do things create that unity that we're looking for.
yeah. When should a parent maybe say no to this balance? When does a parent need to actually step up and say, I see that you want to you want to express yourself this way. You're uniquely made and you're wired this way, but I'm actually going to say no right now.
um I think we need to first establish things that are black and white, right and wrong, and
Okay.
things that are personal preferences.
Okay. That's
Um,
interesting.
so there's certain things in our household, obviously, that are right and wrong. They're non-negotiables.
Mm,
You are underage, you're not going to be drinking. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
Like,
yeah.
there's certain black and white things, and then there's certain things that are preferences. My son wanted to get his ears pierced. And again, this is not, everybody's different,
Right.
but for
Right. Right.
me, that was a preference. It was something that I could allow him to have the freedom of expression, because it wasn't necessarily a right or wrong.
Mm,
And again, that's within my house. You may disagree with that. You may think, well,
yeah.
that'll cause him to not have job opportunities in the future. But again, that was a personal thing that I could allow him, because he was making good choices to exercise that freedom of individuality,
Hmm.
versus that was my personal preference, versus a black and white, right or wrong. You're being mean to your brother because your freedom of expression. No, that's not happening. That is
Mm,
incorrect. That
yeah.
is that is a right and wrong issue.
One thing that we keep coming back to in this podcast is something that my dad says his framework for like a simple framework for helping parents think about how to raise their kids. He says, you want to raise your child to be marriageable, employable, and serviceable to God. So,
Yep.
there's a helpful framework. Am I affirming my child in a way that this actually, if they chase this actually doesn't help them be a good spouse? Like, they think that their
Correct.
needs always trump the other person's needs. That's not a good framework. Or does
Correct.
your child think that their viewpoint should always win out? Well, that's not going to
Mm.
work at the workplace, right?
Right. Unless they're a lawyer, maybe. I don't know.
Unless they're yeah, well, there you go. You have a career path that they should choose. So we kind of keep coming back to that because I think that application fits a lot of different things.
Yes, for sure. And actually, that is one of our phrases at Parenting on Purpose: raising a child to be marriageable, employable, and God honoring. So that's funny.
Well, our dads are friends, so maybe there were some mutual ideas coming out of there. So
yeah, they probably came up with that together at a coffee at some point.
That's funny. Hey, well, Torrey, this has been so helpful to talk with you and explore a little bit more about individuality in our kids and also being part of the family. But thanks for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
That was helpful stuff from Torrey Roberts. And before we end the episode, I want to give you some takeaways to help you apply what we learned in your home. But rather than giving you something to do immediately, I actually want to call you to reflect a little bit on what we learned from Torrey about individuality and family membership. Because there really is a tension. And I think the more you reflect on that tension, it actually becomes more and more clear. So you can say things to your children that sound actually opposite, but they reflect that tension. You can say to your child, I know who you are, and I want to get to know you. As their parent, you know things about them that they don't yet know about themselves. And yet, as their parent, you don't know everything about them, and you don't know who they'll become. So there is that tension there. This is who you will be as a member of our family and as a follower of Jesus. And I'm also excited to see who you will become. It sounds counterintuitive, but actually both of those things are true. And if you take a moment and reflect on those tensions, I think it'll help clarify in your mind where you can give your children freedom to become who they are and where you call them to who your family is and who Christ has called them to be. Torrey mentioned Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. We are called to pull our children towards Christ, to form them by the values of our family so that that's who they are. You can say to your children, hey, as followers of Jesus, here's what Jesus wants us to do. For instance, he wants us to serve our neighbors. He wants us to love our enemies. But here's the interesting thing. Even as you call them to that, there's an individuality into how they express that. Hey, we're called to serve our neighbors. How do you think we could do that? And then all of a sudden you're balancing that tension. Here's what we're called to do. What's a cool idea for how do you do that? Hey, you have an enemy at school. We're called to love our enemies. How do you think you could do that? That's an interesting way to think about balancing these tensions of family membership. We have a culture we're part of. We do things as a family a certain way, and yet you are who you are. In our own family, I wanted my children to learn discipline and teamwork and to have a role that they needed to get good at in order to be part of a group of people. Now, my wife and I both got that through high school sports. We both played basketball in high school. I played college water polo. So when I think about discipline and teamwork and like fulfilling the role I need to, I think about doing that on an athletic team. That's who we wanted to be as a family. But as I really wrestled with that, I thought that's not specifically tied to sports and athletics. That can be tied to other things. They can learn discipline and teamwork and getting good at something in order to be part of a group of people. They can learn that through other things. And it turns out all of my children have gone the route of performing arts, dance, ballet, theater, and ballet, it does take some athleticism, I've learned by watching them, but it turns out that they can learn those things, discipline and teamwork and getting good at something to be part of something. All that comes through performing arts as well as athletics. And so that's helped me really learn that I can call them to something that's important for us as a family, like discipline and teamwork, and yet they can find a path through which to express themselves and grow in that as individuals. So I hope that's been helpful for you. I'm curious, have you experienced that tension? How are you balancing and navigating that tension of having your children be part of your family and yet fostering who they are as individuals? I'd love to hear from you. You can drop a comment in the comment section, or an email is about to pop up and you can email me and let me know. But thanks for joining us today on Rooted by the River. Thank you for listening to Rooted by the River, a Spanish River Church parenting podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, leave your takeaway from this episode in the comment section. If you found the episode helpful, send to a friend or leave a review, which is a great way to help others find the podcast. You can send your questions into rootedbytheriver@SpanishRiver.com. Thanks again for listening.